The ancient sacred text is from Exodus chapter 33, verses 12 through 14. Moses said to Yahweh, "Look, you have told me to lead these people, but you have never told me who you will send with me. You have said to me, I know you by your name, and you have found favor with me. So, if I have found favor with you, teach me your ways so that I might truly know you, and I might find favor in your eyes. Remember that these people are the nation you have chosen as your own." Yahweh replied, "My presence will go with you. Let this set your mind at ease." Holy wisdom, holy word, thanks be to God.
Well, all right. I'll begin with a story. And the story is from not so long ago. Last November. And I feel like a lot of the times the stories that I share are from our time together, that when I was with you. But this is from a time when we were all together and I was here with you. I was driving home from the coast last November from the bishop's convocation. And I don't actually remember, I think I was on a conversation with Joe Morgan, who is our treasurer. He had some bad news for me. He had news of low cash flow at Levin. And the question was, what are we going to do about it? And this sent me into something of a tailspin that lasted for several months. And combined with other things, of course, too, but what happened for me was that it caused me to overwork or perhaps respond appropriately to the situation. It caused me to not sleep very well. And it really separated me from my body and that sense of ease, right? Those breaths that we did, I would try to do breaths like that, and my nervous system would just still feel really electric. And it revealed to me over time, especially as I reflect on it now in retrospect, that there is an unconscious belief that I have that I can rest when Levin is financially stable and secure, and we are all safe. We moved through that moment, and we've again found ourselves in a moment recently where our cash reserves are dipping lower again. And this is part of the season of being really a nonprofit in the nonprofit industrial complex and capitalism, and we can name all of these things. And yet, it was another conversation with Joe, poor Joe. Another conversation with Joe, and boom, there was that electric nervous system right on board again, ready to meet me. So when I approached this sermon today about rest, and my nervous system is still, I have more awareness now, maybe, than last November and December, but it's still there, right? That unconscious belief, that resistance I feel to rest is still there. So I felt that feeling of phoniness, of how can I offer reflections of value when I'm having a hard time finding rest right now. I'm experiencing a lot of some sleeplessness right now. Then I took a closer look, actually, at our sacred text for today, Exodus. We're off lectionary right now this season, and a lot of our texts that are in the Bible about rest were found via Google search. Ticka, 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 what does the Bible have to say about rest? God rests. And in this one, God is having a conversation with Moses. And like we said with the children, Moses, they're actually kind of in a bit of a sticky conversation, right? They've escaped from slavery in Egypt, and they are on their way to the promised land at some point, this land of milk and honey. But they're in that 40 years of wandering in the wilderness. And what happened just prior to this text is that Moses had gone up onto the mountain to receive the 10 Commandments from Yahweh. And while Moses was up on the mountain, what were the Israelites doing? Does anybody remember this? Remember your Charlton Heston? The gold calf, the idol worship, right? And so Moses comes down and sees that the Israelites have, in the story, strayed from God, and Moses breaks the tablets, and God has said, I'm leaving you now. This moment in our text, Moses is saying, you can't leave us. We are your people. Moses is advocating on behalf of the Israelites for God to stay with them. And God says, well, this is what's interesting. Where is the text? Because God says, my presence will go with you, which actually in the Hebrew doesn't mean that God's self is going there yet. God eventually, Moses wins the argument. But let this set your mind at ease is the translation we have here. Other translations are, I will give you rest. This is interesting. I think I need to more closely look at our inclusive Bible translations sooner before Sunday mornings. In this context, I will give you rest. I think what God is saying is set your mind at ease. You will still find your way to the promised land, to this place of milk and honey. This land of milk and honey, remembering, it's in the context of an escape from slavery. It is in the context of liberation. And so there is a connection to milk and honey, to abundance, to there being enough for everyone. There's a connection from liberation to abundance to rest. We feel this in our bodies. We know this. There are real economic implications of rest. When we don't have enough food, when we don't have shelter, there is a scramble to try to find the things that our body needs to be well. And sleep, rest, falls further down on the priority list. But there is a promise for rest, and it is a concrete promise. And this is the interesting thing, I think, too, that Moses and God are in this conversation, and God is saying, yes, you will have rest. And this rest is connected to this land, this place where you will be safe. But we know now, looking back on the rest of the story, that even when the Israelites got to that place that they believed they were being promised by God, what happened? Hi, my love. There were still wars. And Israel was overtaken by multiple empires, by the Babylonians, by the Assyrians, by the Roman Empire. Their sacred places were destroyed multiple times. Their cultural elite, their leaders, their religious leaders, their political leaders were in exile in Babylon and modern-day Iraq. And even now, right, peace in the region is not there. So what happens when the land of milk and honey, when this promise for prosperity, for abundance, for rest doesn't come to bear? What happens if we seek rest and the economic conditions in our lives, in our systems, in our institutions, keep pushing us more and more toward endless striving and toward fatigue? Does anyone else experience that, or is it just me? Yeah. And so this is where we can turn to a Black American woman to teach us. Tricia Hersey is the NAP minister on Instagram. She holds an MDiv from the esteemed Candler School of Theology at Emory University in Atlanta. She wrote a book called Rest as Resistance. And she teaches, as the descendant of enslaved peoples, and in the body of a Black woman in modern-day America, she knows that, like the Israelites, rest for her is interconnected and intertwined with systems of oppression. First, to slavery, when Black people were denied rest, forced to work, connected to capitalism, connected to Jim Crow, to racism, to the ways that our system still results in economic disenfranchisement and other kinds of disenfranchisement. Think about redlining, right? Think about denial of access to the GI Bill. These things play out in very real and concrete ways still today. But Hersey says that rest is for all of us. All of us, when we engage in a practice of rest, right? We're thinking about fractals. All of us are tiny miniature expressions of the systems in which we exist. And when we rest, we are working in our ways to unwind those systems, to renegotiate our relationship to them, to shift them. Rest is for all of us, and it is a part of resistance to our larger culture that encourages all of us to just keep working, keep grinding, keep going. Until what? She says we can't wait until the future to rest. Now is the time to rest. And I take that to mean that faith, that if part of God's promise for liberation for us is this land of milk and honey, this promise of rest and ease, then part of faith is taking rest now, even in spite of all of the other teachings, all of the other symptoms and the signs that we must be working and grinding in order to survive. But then the question, right, is like, how do we do it? I'm thinking again about leaven and the story that I started this with, right? The unconscious beliefs that I hold about my role in this system. Let's see. Here are some of them. That only the leader or pastor or executive director is responsible for the success or the failure of something, of a nonprofit or a church. That success or failure is about money, right? And whether or not we have money. That working hard, that grinding is what keeps us safe from that. And if you are modern sacred text today, that kind of working hard and the grinding and that individualistic thought comes from this Protestant work ethic, right? That Devin Price points us toward, which they say, where is it? The laziness lie rooted in capitalism and a particularly harsh breed of Christianity, preaching that salvation comes from hard work. That's what this is about. Believing that we can get by if we just keep working hard enough. Then we can save ourselves. But we also know this. We know that we are situated within larger contexts. We know that capitalism doesn't value relational connection. That is part of why places like this are hard to fund. We exist because of gifts. We exist because of gifts of individuals. We exist because of gifts of maybe businesses or philanthropists or funders. People's willingness and ability to give from what they have. That's one reason. We also know that as inequality grows, most people have less and a small few have more. And more importantly, we know that actually our ability to stay safe does not come from money. It comes from relationship. It comes from our connection with one another. It's not rooted in a place. It's rooted in this web of relationships and the connection between all of us here in this room and all of us that we know and love that aren't here in this room right now. That's how we keep one another safe. We know that we can do more together and the load is lighter when we do it all together. And how do we define success? Is it by the amount of money in our bank account, by whether or not we have a building? Or is it by our connection with one another and our connection with the sacred as we continue to strive to walk along the path set forth by Jesus? So we can call all these things into question for us. There's probably many other ways that we can disrupt these notions together. We'll talk about some of them. At the end of the day, for those of us in our Christian faith tradition, it's good to know that God promises rest. That part of our liberation is bound up in our body literally resting. Even when God wasn't sure that God was going to accompany the Israelites to the land of milk and honey, God still stood by their commitment to sending Israelites to that land. Put your mind at ease. You will have rest. I will give you rest. So this is part of why we are resting this season. Not only I'm shifting a little bit in real time. I'm thinking about our season where we are right now, right? Our economic survival as a community, but also all of us, we're in this wider context, right? And the season we are in as a global humanity is a season of enormous fatigue, of climate crisis, of political peril, of conflict, genocide, pain, and there's so much fatigue bound up in that. Our ability to connect our bodies to rest is essential. And it's not for the purpose, as I think I often trip up in, it's not for the purpose of then when we rest, we can get up and work some more to make the change. The rest is the thing itself. It's because we have souls and dignity and connection to sacred. These are the things that make life beautiful, that make creation. Rest allows us to admire the beauty and dream the dreams and create and love and long for things. That is part of the promise of liberation that we find in God and in one another. So we will do a rest practice now, and I'm going to hand the microphone back to Stacy. But I want to leave a question for us to perhaps think through when we move to one-to-ones, or for you to think about yourself this week, which is, what are your unconscious conditions for rest? If one of my unconscious conditions is, I only get to rest once Levin is financially secure, and that is a false narrative, we all have them. What's yours? I know I have. There are more. One of them is sitting over there when he's safe too, right? Okay. Thank you.